Hi, friends. Hello, the world. Welcome back to this episode of podcast Complaint Free Life with you, your host, Estelle or Monova. And I'm greeting you from Kyrgyzstan this time. Today's topic that I wanted to talk about is a promise. And the reason why I wanted to do a specific podcast on this is because I'm launching a group coaching program for people in Kyrgyzstan in Kyrgyz and Russian languages. And I'm studying it on December 3rd. And the name that I put for this program is called I Promise. So, and one of the things that I really wanted to instill and also get people to work on is how they can keep their promises and achieve what they want. So the group coaching program is directed only to achieving a goal within 6 months. And then how can you do that? By keeping your promise that you said to yourself. And therefore, it got me thinking a lot about what it is actually about promise and how does this really work and how often we don't really keep our promises to ourselves. So if I were to ask you or anyone else on the street, how often do you keep your promise to yourself? What do you think the answers would be? Versus when I asked, how often do you keep promises that you give to other people? So imagine a life when we kept all of our promises to ourselves and did everything that we said we would do and achieve everything that we want. How would that life be? Because for me, I'm thinking about promise more like a step to getting the result you want. It's like a small pieces of guarantee that we're looking for. Like I was saying the other day in my post, that whenever we embark upon a goal, we always want a guarantee. We say, if it's guaranteed that I will achieve it, then I will go for it. Or if we think that it's going to work out, then I will do it. Otherwise, I don't, right? So we always seek this guarantee. And I'm realizing more and more that promise is that step to one of the pieces of that guarantee that we don't see now, but by keeping our promises, we give ourselves that guarantee that this will happen. So that guarantee, however, is usually left without really being said out loud or without really being recorded somewhere, without really being taken seriously. So that's why today's blog post or the podcast, I want to talk about how we can learn from keeping our promises to other people and then take that lesson and how can we do that with ourselves all of the time if we're not good at it yet. So imagine the classic examples of giving promises, right? So the classic example that I can think of whenever I think of a promise is that I promise to do a particular work in an employment, or I promise to stay in this marriage, or I promise to deliver you something that I promised I would do. So whenever we make these promises to other people, we say it out loud, we say it, we record it somehow. We know that other people know about it, or at least the person that we're promising to knows about it. So therefore, we tend to keep it more so than when we promise ourselves, when we just say it within ourselves, or when we just think about it without really realizing or thinking that this is a promise. So what thought becomes a promise? Think about it. How do you promise yourself? And what kind of promises do you give yourself, and what kind of promises you don't? And most importantly, that you could also look at it is what kind of promises you don't keep. Right? So maybe there are certain promises that you do keep about yourself or about your life, but certain promises you don't. So for instance, I promise myself a lot of things and I accomplish it. But if it's something related to sports or exercises, I don't sometimes keep that promise because I can find all the reasons why I wouldn't do it today. I can do it tomorrow, whatever, whatever. Now, of course, there might be many, many promise breakers as to why we don't keep promises, right? So one of the things that we don't really believe in the end result, or we don't really see the result yet. So that's why it's not really motivating to keep doing the promise that you said. You don't really trust yourself, or you don't really respect your opinion, or you don't really honor your own promises because no one heard it, or because you didn't really give yourself that promise. So that's why I wanted us to start keeping all the promises to ourselves and accomplish them. And that way we could send the message to ourselves that we respect ourselves, we trust ourselves, we show this way that we trust, and we most importantly guarantee the result in the long run. Right? Because we're looking for that guarantee that this will work out in the long run. But in order for that guarantee to happen, we need to be building that steps now, or the puzzle pieces now. And each of that puzzle piece, I think, is the promise. So think about what happens if you don't keep the promise that you make. How does it make you feel? Versus if you just keep accomplishing other people's or promises that you gave to other people. What kind of message you're sending to yourself when you're not making yourself a promise? So promises could be a lot of things, right? It could be, I don't eat this anymore, or I eat this type of food from now on. I promise to be on time. I promise to take care of myself. I promise to go for a walk, or I promise to love myself. I promise not to criticize myself. I promise not to abuse myself. Whatever the promise is, let's realize first, how are we giving ourselves the promise? What's the granular mechanism of doing it? Is it something that you say out loud to yourself? Is it something that you record and then you go and do it? Is it something that you just think about it and then it happens? What is the best way for you to work out? It could just be one simple sentence that looks like a promise. It could also have the word in it that says, I promise myself that I do this, or I promise myself I don't do this anymore. Right? So think about what are the effective ways that you are giving yourself promise, and how are you accomplishing them? And most importantly, how do you feel when you accomplish them? Because when I accomplish them, this builds my trust in myself little by little, which I love. Because whenever I accomplish my promise, I'm telling myself, I'm taking my desires and my wishes seriously. I am doing things that I want to do in this way because I promised myself. Even if no one heard it, I heard it, right? It's important that I heard it. Even if I don't have accountability to other people, but I have accountability to myself. So I just want us to come back to this granular level of building these pieces of the puzzle so that we can have the whole picture. And then when we keep our promises, keep accomplishing those promises, then we keep telling ourselves that this is another guarantee that I can do this. This is another guarantee that I can do this. This is another guarantee that whatever I'm thinking of will happen. And we go little by little, keep doing, and then getting the grand results that we want. So another way of looking at it could also be that look at your past and look at the things that you've been able to keep as a promise that you said, be it to other people, be it to yourself. So you could look at whatever you promised to your mom, to your spouse, to whoever in your life who you value. You gave them a promise and then you accomplished it. To a loved ones, right? Think of all of those habits that you have accomplished it. And how does it make you feel when you accomplish it? And you can even think about how that does that make the other person feel when you accomplish that. How much joy and happiness that brings to the other person if you promise something and you accomplished it. Now, whenever I'm saying all of this, you may think, well, isn't that too much to keep promising yourself a lot of things? I understand that, because we don't want to be also very pedantic and, promising everything and then not accomplishing it. Because that may not actually get us far as well, because our brains are so much distracted to so many different promises and keep accomplishing them. So that's why, depending on what your experience is, you can decide to focus on one thing and keep your promise to getting that thing done, or getting that thing done even if you don't want to do that, because you know why you're doing it, and keep that promise and then keep doing it. Right? So we know that even if we set any goal in our lives, there will be times when we don't want to do this. There will be times when our brains will be dramatizing, finding excuses, and that's normal. Well, at least normal if your brain is like mine. So that's why, especially in those moments, promise becomes crucial. So it could be a promise of, I want to be the person who accomplishes what he or she promised to herself or himself. I want to be that person. Therefore, you do it even if you don't want to do it at that point in time. Another way maybe you could go is day by day. So you know what the goal is, but you don't want to set big plans and long plans because your brain's like, no, you can't do all of this because it's too complicated, or you never accomplish your goal because you're not that type of person, or whatever your brain tells you. And I understand. So that's why you can also do it one day in advance to say, okay, well, this is what I'm going to promise to do tomorrow, and I'm going to do it. You don't need to go all the way far into the future. Excuse me. You can just focus on that one day at a time. And then what happens is that once you start building that momentum, you realize that if you can do one day at a time, you can also do 1 week at a time. If you can do 1 week at a time, you can also do 1 month at a time. So you can also grow that way if you prefer, but that's not necessary as long as you have the goal in mind, and as long as you know where you're going and trying and testing. That promise becomes so crucial. So think about every great result in life starts or guaranteed with a little promise and accomplishing it. So in other words, every great result starts with a thought, and that thought creates a certain type of feeling, and then that feeling drives us to doing all these things, which then creates the results. So that promise can be a one sentence. It doesn't have to be very complicated. It doesn't have to be sophisticated. All it can be is one sentence, and you just promise yourself whichever way you want to. You can say to other people if you want to get your accountability going. You can also tell it yourself. You can write about it. You can record it. You can also do a video message to yourself. When you accomplish that, you will say that this is what I promised myself that I will get, and here it is. You can do that every day, recording and saying, I accomplished this, well done me. So whatever works for you, think of it, how can I promise myself in the most effective way and keep it? What happens if I keep my promise every day? Even if I don't want to, what kind of results could you achieve? And how your life be different, right? So that's what we're looking for. So you take whatever thing that is pending, that's somehow in your mind somewhere, you're thinking about it, of doing it or accomplishing it, wanting it. Take one simple promise toward that goal, toward that desire, toward that wish, and say, I'm going to promise myself this one thing every day. And then you keep doing that one thing every day. If you have tried any other way to accomplish something and it didn't work, think of it, as I said, a promise being a step, one step at a time. And then you get to the result that you want, and you will be amazed how much you will be happy. And not only, but you will start trusting that, wait a minute, if I can do this, I can do anything else. This is how it was for me with learning languages. This is how it was for me learning to do many other things, is that I would say, I promise not to quit. This would be one of the promises. Or I promise to do this even if it's hard. I promise to love myself no matter what. I promise to respect and honor my wishes and desires no matter what. I promise to treat myself well, respectfully, with constructive feedback, no matter what. I promise to do hard things if it leads to my goals. So whatever the promises you're having, let's start granularly learning about our promises and see where our small promises every day, the ones that no one hears except ourselves, how far they take us to the highest version of ourselves, or designing the life that we want. Okay, my friends, thank you so much for watching. It was a pleasure to talk to you about promises. So what are you promising?